The forest was quiet, its tall trees swaying gently under the touch of a soft breeze. Nathan, a wilderness guide who had spent most of his life among nature's beauty, adjusted the straps of his backpack. It was supposed to be a regular day, a hike to clear his mind. Little did he know, his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. He was halfway through the trail when something unusual caught his eye. A strange metallic object lay buried in a cluster of broken branches, smoke rising faintly from its surface. Curiosity tugged at him, and he stepped closer, his boots crunching against the leaves. It was a small spacecraft, or at least that's what it looked like. Nathan's heart raced. A part of him wanted to turn back, but his adventurous nature wouldn't let him. He walked around the wreck, his eyes scanning for any signs of life. Then he saw her, a young woman, her skin pale blue and her white hair shimmering faintly under the sunlight, was lying unconscious near the wreckage. She wore an outfit made of strange, smooth material that clung to her frame. Cuts and bruises marred her delicate skin, and her breathing was shallow. Nathan crouched beside her, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? But the most pressing thought was clear. She needed help. "Hey," he said softly, hoping she could hear him. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, and for a brief moment, she looked at him. Her bright silver eyes were filled with something he couldn't quite place. Fear, confusion, or perhaps both. She tried to speak, but her voice was too weak, her lips barely moving before she passed out again. Nathan didn't hesitate. Whoever she was, she couldn't stay here in the middle of the forest. Gently, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her fragile frame feeling almost weightless. The hike back to his cabin was slow and careful. Nathan's mind kept replaying the strange sight. The wrecked ship, the woman, her otherworldly appearance. Yet there was no time to dwell on these mysteries. Her safety came first. Reaching his cabin, Nathan placed her on his old, comfortable couch. He grabbed his first aid kit, his hands moving quickly yet carefully as he cleaned her wounds. As he worked, he couldn't help but study her features. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her face was soft, her beauty almost ethereal, but there was a weariness about her that stirred something in his heart, an urge to protect her. When he finished tending to her injuries, Nathan sat back and watched her sleep. Questions swirled in his mind, but he knew there were no immediate answers. All he could do now was wait. Hours passed before she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in her surroundings before landing on Nathan. She tried to sit up but winced, her body too weak. "Easy," Nathan said, his voice calm. "You're safe here. I found you in the forest. Do you remember what happened?" Her gaze narrowed, as if trying to decide whether he was a threat. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but carried an unfamiliar accent. "Why? Why did you help me?" Nathan blinked, surprised by the question. "Because you needed help," he replied simply. Her expression remained guarded, but there was a flicker of something else, something that looked a lot like disbelief. She had been raised in a world where kindness was rare, where help was always conditional. This human, however, seemed different. As the silence stretched between them, Nathan offered a small smile. "Rest for now. We can talk later." For the first time in her life, the woman didn't feel alone. It was strange, and she didn't trust it. But deep down, she couldn't help but wonder, was this what it felt like to be cared for? The cabin was quiet, except for the occasional crackle of the fire in the corner. Kira, as Nathan learned she called herself, sat stiffly on the couch, her silver eyes scanning the room like a trapped animal searching for an escape. Nathan handed her a steaming mug of herbal tea. "Drink this. It'll help." She hesitated, her fingers brushing against the smooth ceramic. In her world, nothing was ever given freely. Trust was a currency she had never learned to spend. Slowly, she lifted the mug to her lips and took a cautious sip. The warmth spread through her, easing the chill in her bones. "Where am I?" she finally asked, her voice uncertain. "You're in my cabin," Nathan said, pulling a chair close to her. "We're deep in the forest, far from the nearest town. I found you near that ship of yours." Kira flinched at the mention of her ship. It had been her only connection to her people, and now it was gone. She didn't know if she should feel relief or fear. Nathan leaned forward, his expression gentle but curious. "Do you want to tell me what happened? Who you are? Where you're from?" She looked away, her fingers tightening around the mug. "It doesn't matter," she murmured. "I don't belong here." Nathan frowned but didn't push. He could see the weight she carried, the way her shoulders seemed burdened by more than just her injuries. "Well, for now, you're safe," he said. "That's what matters." His words were simple, but they unsettled Kira. Safety wasn't something she had ever truly experienced. In her world, strength was survival, and emotions were liabilities. The way this human spoke to her, with patience and kindness, was both confusing and unnerving. Nathan stood and moved to the small kitchen area. "Are you hungry? I've got soup on the stove. It's nothing fancy, but it'll fill you up." Kira's stomach growled in response, betraying her silence. Nathan chuckled softly, a sound she found oddly comforting. He ladled a portion into a bowl and placed it in front of her. She eyed the soup cautiously, the steam rising in soft swirls. Her people didn't share meals like this. Food was rationed, eaten in solitude. Yet here was this human, offering her sustenance without any expectation. "What do you want from me?" she asked suddenly, her voice sharp. Nathan paused, startled by the question. "What do I want?" he repeated, confused. "Nothing. You needed help, so I helped." Her eyes narrowed. "No one does anything for free." Nathan sat down across from her, meeting her gaze with calm honesty. "Maybe where you're from, that's true. But here, people help each other. It's just the right thing to do." Kira stared at him, trying to find the catch, the hidden motive. But his expression was open, sincere. It was unsettling. She picked up the spoon and took a small sip of the soup. The warmth spread through her, soothing and unfamiliar. Nathan didn't press her further. He talked instead about the forest, the animals he'd seen, and the stars he liked to watch at night. Kira listened, though she didn't say much. His voice was steady, a strange comfort in the chaos of her thoughts. As the evening stretched on, Kira felt a strange pull in her chest, a mix of curiosity and unease. This human, Nathan, was unlike anyone she had ever met. He wasn't trying to manipulate her, hurt her, or demand something in return. When she finally lay down to rest, wrapped in a soft blanket Nathan had given her, she stared at the wooden ceiling above her. For the first time in her life, she felt a glimmer of something foreign, something terrifying. It wasn't fear or distrust. It was the faint, fragile warmth of hope. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the cabin, casting warm patches of light on the wooden floor. Kira woke up slowly, her body still sore, but feeling better than the day before. For a moment, she was disoriented, the soft blanket wrapped around her, and the quiet hum of nature outside unfamiliar. Then she remembered, the human, Nathan. She sat up cautiously, her silver eyes scanning the room. Nathan was by the fireplace, stirring a pot. The scent of food wafted through the air, and her stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten much in days. "You're awake," Nathan said, turning to her with a smile. "Good. I made some breakfast. You need to eat to get your strength back." Kira nodded but remained quiet. She wasn't used to small talk or casual kindness. Her people didn't waste words on unnecessary pleasantries. Nathan placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the small table in front of her. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing," he said, sitting down with his own plate. Kira stared at the food, then at Nathan. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of suspicion. Nathan paused mid-bite, looking thoughtful. "I guess it's just how I was raised," he said. "Helping someone in need. It's what makes us human." Kira frowned. The concept was alien to her. In her world, Survival was a solitary battle, and showing kindness was seen as a weakness. But here, this human seemed to live by an entirely different set of rules. She took a tentative bite of the eggs. The flavors were simple but comforting. As she ate, she found herself observing Nathan more closely. His easy manner, the way he moved with purpose but without aggression, and his willingness to share, it all intrigued her. After breakfast, Nathan began gathering supplies for the day. "I need to check on the wreckage of your ship," he said. "See if there's anything we can salvage. You should rest here." Kira stood, her posture stiff but determined. "I'm coming with you." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? You're still recovering." She nodded firmly. "It's my ship. I need to see it." They set off together, walking through the dense forest. Nathan slowed his pace to match hers, and Kira couldn't help but notice the way he moved through the woods, confident but respectful, as if he belonged here. As they approached the crash site, Kira felt a pang of loss. The small craft, now charred and broken, had been her only connection to her people. She knelt beside it, running her fingers over the damaged surface. Nathan crouched beside her, his tone gentle. "Is there anything you can use? Something that might help you contact your people?" Kira shook her head. "It's too damaged. The communication system is destroyed." Nathan studied her for a moment. "Do you want to go back to them?" The question caught her off guard. Did she? Her people had never shown her the care or kindness that Nathan had in just a single day. Yet, they were her family, her world. "I don't know," she admitted softly. Nathan nodded, respecting her uncertainty. "Well, for now, we'll figure things out together," he said. "You're not alone in this." Kira looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deceit. There was none. His words carried a sincerity she had never encountered before. As they made their way back to the cabin, Kira found herself walking a little closer to him. She still didn't fully understand this human or his motivations, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she didn't have to face everything on her own. The forest seemed less hostile, the world less cold, and for Kira, that was enough to take the first fragile steps toward trust. The cabin felt quieter than usual as Kira sat by the window, watching the forest. The view was peaceful, but her mind was anything but. She couldn't shake the unease growing within her. Nathan had gone out to gather firewood, leaving her alone to wrestle with her thoughts. He was kind, too kind, and that was the problem. Kira had spent her entire life in a world where kindness was a tool, a strategy to gain leverage. Nathan's actions didn't fit that logic, and it unsettled her deeply. When the door creaked open, Nathan walked in with an armful of firewood, his cheeks pink from the cold. He gave her a warm smile as he placed the wood by the fireplace. "Perfect weather for staying inside," he said, brushing his hands off. Kira didn't respond right away. She folded her arms and narrowed her eyes at him. "Why do you keep doing this?" Nathan turned to her, confused. "Doing what?" "Helping me. Taking care of me. What do you get out of it?" Her tone was sharp, almost accusing. Nathan sighed, walking over to the small table and pulling out a chair. He sat down across from her, his expression serious but calm. "I've told you before, Kira. It's just what I do. I help people when they need it." She shook her head, frustration evident on her face. "That doesn't make sense. In my world, no one helps without expecting something in return. It's foolish." Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Maybe in your world, but not here. Helping someone doesn't have to be about gaining something. Sometimes, it's just about doing the right thing." Kira stared at him, struggling to process his words. "Your way of thinking is strange," she said finally. Nathan chuckled. "Maybe to you, but it's how I was raised. My parents always said kindness is what makes us human." Her eyes softened slightly at his words, but she quickly masked it with skepticism. "Kindness gets you killed where I'm from. It makes you weak." Nathan studied her carefully. "Maybe that's why you look so tired," he said gently. Kira blinked, taken aback by his words. What do you mean? I mean you've been carrying everything alone for so long. Your survival, your pain, your doubts. You don't trust anyone because you've never had a reason to. That sounds exhausting. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. He was right, and that realization stung. Nathan stood and walked to the fireplace, adding a log to the flames. You don't have to trust me completely right now, Kira. I get it, but maybe give yourself a chance to see that not everyone's out to hurt you. Kira frowned, unsure how to respond. The idea of trusting someone, even a little, felt like stepping into an unknown abyss. But Nathan's calm demeanor and consistent kindness were starting to wear down her defenses. That evening, they shared a quiet meal. Nathan told her about his life, his work as a wilderness guide, his love for the forest, and how he'd learned to rely on himself, but never stopped believing in the good in people. Kira listened intently, her guarded nature loosening with each story he told. For the first time, she shared something about herself. She spoke of her cold, calculated society, where emotions were seen as distractions and survival was the only priority. Nathan didn't interrupt or judge. He simply listened, his expression understanding. By the time the fire burned low, Kira felt a small shift within herself. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Nathan's strange kindness wasn't a weakness, but a strength she had never understood before. As she settled into her makeshift bed, she realized the cabin didn't feel as foreign as it had before. The world outside still loomed large and unfamiliar, but inside, the warmth of the fire and Nathan's unwavering kindness made her feel less alone. The days in the cabin began to settle into a quiet rhythm. Kira found herself growing accustomed to Nathan's presence, his simple ways, and the strange warmth he brought into her life. It was unlike anything she had ever known, and that unfamiliarity both intrigued and terrified her. One morning, Nathan invited her to join him outside. The frost on the ground sparkled under the pale sunlight, and the forest seemed alive with the gentle sounds of nature. Come on, Nathan said, handing her a thick jacket. There's something I want to show you. Kira hesitated, but curiosity won. She followed him along a winding path that led to a small clearing. In the center stood a towering tree, its branches bare but strong, stretching high into the sky. Nathan smiled and gestured to it. This is my favorite spot. Whenever I need to clear my head, I come here. Kira looked up at the tree, her silver eyes tracing its intricate branches. It's beautiful, she said softly, surprising herself. Nathan chuckled. Yeah, it is. I think trees like this are a reminder of how strong we can be, even when everything around us seems harsh. She turned to him, frowning slightly. You talk about strength like it comes from something other than survival. Where I'm from, strength is about power, control. Nathan shook his head. Strength isn't just about standing alone. Sometimes, it's about letting others in, trusting them to stand with you. That's what makes us stronger. Kira didn't respond, but his words stayed with her as they walked back to the cabin. She thought about her own life, how she had been taught to rely on no one, to suppress emotions, to never show weakness. Yet here was Nathan, showing her a different kind of strength. That evening, Nathan pulled out an old guitar from a corner of the room. Kira watched curiously as he strummed a few chords, the soft melody filling the cabin. What is that? She asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Nathan grinned. It's a guitar. Music is something humans use to express ourselves, our feelings, our stories. He began to play a gentle tune, humming along as his fingers moved across the strings. Kira felt something stir inside her, a strange, unfamiliar ache. The music was more than sound. It was emotion, raw and unfiltered. When he finished, Kira was quiet for a long moment. We don't have anything like that, she said finally. Where I'm from, emotions are controlled. Music like this would be seen as pointless. Nathan set the guitar aside and looked at her. But how does it make you feel? She hesitated, then admitted, it makes me feel something I don't understand. It's like a weight, but it's not heavy. It's strange. Nathan smiled softly. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to make sense. It just is. That night, as Kira lay on the couch staring at the wooden ceiling, she felt the weight of her past pressing down on her. She thought about her cold, rigid world, where kindness was a weakness and trust was a trap. And then she thought about Nathan, his patience, his unwavering kindness, the way he seemed to see her not as a stranger or an outsider, but as someone worth caring for. For the first time, she wondered if there was another way to live, a way that didn't require her to always be on guard, to always expect the worst. The thought was terrifying, but it was also freeing. As sleep began to claim her, she realized that Nathan's world, though strange and unfamiliar, held something she had never known, the possibility of hope. The cabin was warm, the fire crackling softly as Kira and Nathan sat together. She had started to open up more, sharing fragments of her life and the struggles she had faced. Nathan listened with patience, his understanding deepening with every story. But peace was fleeting. Late one evening, as the stars twinkled above the forest, a low hum echoed in the distance. Kira froze, her silver eyes widening in alarm. "What's wrong?" Nathan asked, noticing her sudden tension. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Nathan's brows furrowed. "Who?" "My people," Kira replied, standing abruptly. "They must have tracked my ship's signal. They're coming for me." Nathan stood too, his mind racing. "Is that a good thing?" Kira shook her head, panic clear on her face. "No, they won't understand. They'll see you as a threat, and they'll take me back whether I want to go or not." The hum grew louder, a bright light piercing the darkness outside. Nathan's instincts kicked in. "We have to move. Come on." He grabbed a backpack, quickly filling it with essentials. Kira hesitated for a moment, torn between the fear of her people and the strange, fragile trust she had started to build with Nathan. "Let's go," he urged, pulling her out of her thoughts. They slipped out the back door, the forest swallowing them in shadows. Nathan led the way, his familiarity with the terrain guiding them through narrow paths and dense trees. Behind them, the light from the alien vessel cast an eerie glow over the cabin. Kira's heart raced. She knew her people wouldn't stop until they found her. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't have to do this. They'll hurt you if they catch you." He glanced back at her, his expression firm. "I'm not leaving you. We'll figure this out together." Kira's chest tightened. No one had ever said those words to her before. In her world, survival was a solitary battle. But here was Nathan, risking everything for her without hesitation. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sound of voices echoed behind them. Kira recognized the commanding tone of her people's leader. They were getting closer. Nathan stopped, crouching behind a fallen tree. "We'll wait here for a bit. They might pass us." Kira nodded, though her hands trembled. She felt a crushing weight of guilt. Nathan was in danger because of her, and she didn't know how to stop it. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of boots on leaves. Nathan's jaw tightened as he held a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. Kira's people moved past their hiding spot, their sharp, glowing equipment scanning the area. She held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they would hear it. Finally, the group moved on, their lights fading into the distance. Nathan exhaled quietly, his muscles relaxing. "Come on," he whispered, helping Kira to her feet. They continued their escape, the forest seeming darker and colder than ever. Kira couldn't shake the fear that her people would find them, that Nathan would pay the price for her choices. When they finally stopped near a small cave, Nathan turned to her. "We'll stay here for now. They'll have a harder time tracking us in this area." Kira sat on a rock, her shoulders slumped. "You didn't have to help me," she said, her voice barely audible. You could have stayed safe. Nathan crouched in front of her, his eyes meeting hers. You're not just some stranger, Kira. You're my friend. And I don't leave my friends behind. Her eyes stung with unused tears. She had spent her entire life believing that trust and love were weaknesses, but in Nathan's actions, she saw a strength she had never known, a strength born from selflessness and courage. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was worth saving. The forest was silent, the dense trees shielding Kira and Nathan from the alien search team that hunted them. They had spent the night in the small cave, its cold walls offering little comfort but some measure of safety. Kira sat by the cave entrance, her silver eyes fixed on the faint light of dawn. Nathan was asleep nearby, his body resting after hours of guiding her through the wilderness. She couldn't help but marvel at his resilience, his unwavering determination to protect her despite the risks. Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound in the distance, a low hum that made her stomach twist. They were still searching. Her people were relentless, and she knew they wouldn't stop until they found her. Nathan stirred, his eyes opening slowly. He stretched and sat up, noticing the tension on Kira's face. They're still out there, aren't they? She nodded, her voice low. They won't stop until they find me. Nathan stood, brushing dirt off his jacket. Then we'll keep moving. We'll figure something out. Kira turned to him, her expression conflicted. Nathan, this isn't your fight. You don't have to do this. He stepped closer, his gaze steady. I'm not leaving you, Kira. We're in this together. Her chest tightened at his words. No one had ever stood by her like this. She had always been alone, taught to fend for herself, to trust no one. But Nathan was different, and his unwavering support was starting to change something deep inside her. As they prepared to leave the cave, a sudden light illuminated the entrance. Kira froze, her heart pounding. A group of her people stood outside, their weapons raised. At the front was the commander, his face cold and unyielding. Kira, step forward. You are coming with us. Nathan moved in front of her instinctively, his body shielding hers. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to, he said firmly. The commander's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. Human, you do not understand what you're dealing with. This is not your concern. Step aside. Kira's mind raced. She knew the commander wouldn't hesitate to use force, and Nathan was no match for their advanced technology. But the thought of leaving him, of abandoning the one person who had shown her true kindness, was unbearable. No, Kira said, her voice strong despite the fear coursing through her. The commander's gaze snapped to her. What did you say? I said no, she repeated, stepping out from behind Nathan. I'm not going back. Not like this. The commander's face darkened. You are defying your people, your duty. This human has corrupted you. Kira shook her head. No, he showed me what you never could. He showed me kindness, trust, and strength. I won't abandon that. Nathan glanced at her, his eyes filled with pride and determination. The commander raised a hand, signaling his team to prepare their weapons. You leave me no choice, Kira. If you won't come willingly, we'll take you by force. Before they could act, Kira stepped forward, raising her hands. Wait, she said, her voice calm but firm. If you take me, it'll be without a fight, but only if you let him go. Nathan's jaw tightened. Kira, no. She turned to him, her expression soft but resolute. I can't let them hurt you, Nathan. You've done enough. You've shown me what it means to care, and I won't let that be for nothing. The commander watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. After a tense moment, he lowered his hand. Very well, the human lives. But you will come with us. Nathan grabbed her arm gently. You don't have to do this, Kira. She looked into his eyes, her heart breaking. Yes, I do. For you. As the aliens led her away, Kira glanced back at Nathan, memorizing his face, the warmth in his eyes. She had made her choice, a choice born from love, the very thing her world had denied her. But deep down, she vowed this wasn't the end. She would find a way back to him. She had to. The alien ship soared through the sky, leaving Earth far behind. Kira sat silently in a small chamber, her wrists bound by glowing restraints. The walls were cold, just like the stares of the crew who had brought her back. Yet, her mind wasn't on the icy treatment or the fear of what awaited her. It was on Nathan. She had seen something in him she never thought existed, true selflessness. He had risked everything for her, someone he barely knew, with nothing to gain in return. The memory of his unwavering determination warmed her in a way her world never had. The door to the chamber slid open, and the commander stepped inside. His expression was as cold as his voice. "You've shamed yourself, Kira, to defy your people for a primitive. It's disgraceful." Kira raised her head, meeting his gaze. "No, Commander. What's disgraceful is the way we've lived. Cold, unfeeling, blind to the strength that trust and compassion can bring." He scoffed, stepping closer. "And what has it brought you?" "Nothing but captivity." "Not true," she replied firmly. "It's brought me clarity. Nathan showed me what it means to care, to fight for someone else, and I wouldn't trade that for anything." The commander narrowed his eyes but said nothing. He left the room without another word, the door hissing shut behind him. As the hours passed, Kira's mind churned with thoughts of escape. She couldn't go back to her old life, not after what she had experienced. She had to find a way to return to Earth, to Nathan. When the ship docked on her homeworld, Kira was led through the sterile metallic halls of the capital. Her people's gazes were sharp and judgmental, their whispers like blades slicing through her resolve. But she didn't waver. For the first time, she felt something stronger than fear, determination. In the days that followed, Kira was confined to her quarters, her every move monitored. Her people wanted her to reflect on her mistake. But instead, she planned. One evening, as she gazed out the window at the cold, unfeeling city below, an idea sparked in her mind. Her ship may have been destroyed, but her people had countless others. If she could access one, she could escape. The plan wasn't without risks, but Kira knew she had to try. She waited for the perfect moment, slipping past the guards and navigating the labyrinth of the capital with precision. Her heart raced as she approached the hangar, the sleek ships gleaming under artificial light. She chose a smaller vessel, one built for speed rather than combat. As she powered it up, alarms blared, and she knew she had only moments before they caught her. The ship's engines roared to life, and she launched into the sky, her hands steady on the controls. The cold, harsh landscape of her world faded behind her as she broke through the atmosphere, her destination clear. Earth. The journey was long, but Kira didn't waver. Her mind replayed every moment with Nathan, his smile, his kindness, his courage. She had left him to protect him, but now she realized that their connection was worth fighting for. When she finally entered Earth's atmosphere, her heart swelled with hope. She guided the ship toward the forest where it had all begun, her hands trembling with anticipation. The ship landed softly in a clearing, and Kira stepped out, her silver eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. She didn't have to search for long. Nathan appeared from the trees, his expression a mix of disbelief and joy. "Kira." Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "I told you we'd figure it out. Together." Nathan crossed the distance between them, his relief palpable. "You came back." "I had to," she said simply. "You showed me a world worth returning to." As they stood together in the quiet forest, Kira felt something she had never experienced before. Peace. She wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time, she truly believed in the strength of love. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the forest as Kira and Nathan stood side by side, the quiet world around them seeming almost too perfect. Kira couldn't remember the last time she had felt this way. At peace, connected, and free. Her return to Earth hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every risk. Now, standing here with Nathan, she realized just how far she had come. Her world, once cold and empty, now felt full of possibilities. Nathan broke the silence, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "I can't believe you're really here. I thought I'd never see you again." Kira turned to him, her silver eyes bright with unspoken feelings. "I couldn't leave you, Nathan. Not after everything you've shown me. After everything we shared." Nathan reached out, gently taking her hand. It was a small gesture, but to Kira, it felt like everything. She had spent her life in a world where trust and affection were considered weaknesses, and now she was beginning to understand their true power. "You risked everything for me," Kira said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever repay you for that." "You don't have to," Nathan replied, his voice steady and warm. "All I need is you here, with me. That's all that matters." Kira felt a lump in her throat, the weight of his words settling deep within her heart. For so long, she had believed that survival meant being alone. That strength came from isolation. But Nathan had shown her a different kind of strength, one born from love, from connection, and it was a strength that felt like home. They sat down on the grass, the evening air cool against their skin. Kira rested her head on Nathan's shoulder, closing her eyes and listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. In this moment, nothing else mattered. "I never thought I'd feel like this," Kira admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Back where I come from, love was something we were taught to avoid. It was weakness. But now you know better," Nathan finished for her, his voice filled with understanding. Kira nodded, her heart swelling with a new understanding of the world and herself. She had left her old life behind, but in doing so, she had gained something even more precious: the chance to build something new, something real. The wind rustled through the trees, and Kira took a deep breath, savoring the fresh, earthy scent of the forest. She felt alive in a way she never had before, the air around her filled with endless possibilities. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked, her voice soft. "Your old life, before I came along?" Nathan chuckled lightly, the sound warm and comforting. "My old life. It was peaceful, but it was empty. I didn't know what I was missing until you came into it." Kira looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I never thought I'd find a place like this, a place where I can truly be myself, a place where I don't have to hide who I am." "You don't have to hide anything," Nathan said firmly, his hand gently squeezing hers. "You're exactly where you're meant to be." For the first time, Kira believed him. The weight that had once pressed down on her chest, the fear, the doubt, the loneliness had begun to lift. With Nathan by her side, she felt like she could face anything. Together, they would build a life filled with hope and love, something Kira had never dreamed possible. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Kira and Nathan sat together, the future stretching out before them like an open road. It wasn't clear what lay ahead, but for the first time, Kira was ready to face it, because she no longer had to do it alone. With Nathan, she had found something worth fighting for, a love that wasn't bound by rules or expectations, a love that was free, real, and endless. And that was all she needed. As the night fell, they stayed together, the silence between them filled with more than words could ever express. It was a new beginning. And this time, Kira knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.